Well, a few weeks ago we had this exact van in the shop for a fuel gauge problem. We took care of some corroded wires, everything was working fine, but now the gauge started acting up again. So there's a good possibility that the sender unit itself has gone bad. Unfortunately, you can't buy a sender unit for this vehicle. So today, we're going to pull it out, see if we can fix it. My name's Cam, this is Project Addiction. Stay tuned. So like I said, we have done some work on this vehicle already. Last time it was in, we cleaned up some very corroded wiring on the fuel sender, and that did seem to solve the problem. The gauge functioned properly, but unfortunately, when the van hits bumps, the gauge now sometimes cuts out. So what we're going to do today is we're going to pull the sender unit out and inspect it, see if maybe we can find out what's going on. Because this one's a gasser, we've had no luck finding a new sender unit, and that's why we need to try and fix the one that's in it. So the first thing I'm going to do is take the wheel off to gain a little bit better access, and also that way I can film a little bit better for you. This fan's got a little line fitted on there because at some point in time it had a gas heater in it. And I went to pull it off and fuel started pouring out. I had the van lifted up like this because unfortunately it had about 2/3 of a tank in it, and I was hoping if we tipped the van up far enough I'd be able to pull the sender without draining the tank. That didn't work. So now we're gonna just pull this tiny little line off and let it drain for a while. I'm gonna let that sit and we'll come back in a little bit. So your sender unit might be a little bit different because likely you're not going to have this additional pickup tube in yours, so it should come out a little bit easier. Just remember the little 8mm nuts that hold this in are threaded onto a stud, which is part of the tank. You break those studs off, you're going to be in for a world of hurt. So make sure you use some good lubricant on them and work them off slowly and gently. Don't force it. If you snap it, you'll regret it. The sender unit itself is very simple. It consists of your mounting plate, the plug, a float that moves up and down with the fuel level, and what is basically a potentiometer right in here. As the float moves up, it changes the resistance, and in turn that change in resistance moves the gauge. These older units can be rebuilt, cleaned up, or fixed. Some of the newer ones actually use a carbon trace in here, and once that wears through, there's nothing you can do about it. An older unit like this uses a bunch of copper windings inside, and then a little sweeper that runs along them. So without actually getting inside and looking, it's going to be real hard to tell the condition. So what we're going to do is we're going to kind of clean up the outside a little bit, and then we're actually going to take this apart and see if we can see the condition of the windings themselves. So first thing we're going to do is determine what each of these pins are, and then we're going to test the sender. So this particular unit has 3 pins. 2 of them are going to be for the float, and 1 of them is going to be for the low fuel light, which is likely going to be a level switch here. The easiest way to do this is to eliminate the level light. Take your voltmeter, set it to continuity, and make sure the chime is on. And then we're going to test each one of these pins for the level switch. Alright, so it looks like it's this pin right here is for the level switch, which means these 2 are going to be for the sweep gauge. Turn the chime off, place both of our probes into the plug, making sure we make contact with each one of the pins. Now we're going to watch for a change as we move the gauge. Okay, and we can see we're open circuit, so that means there's something wrong with the level sender in here. So open circuit means that between pin 1 and pin 2, we have no continuity or no connection. The circuit is broken. We're going to have to open this up very carefully. So to open up the sender, there's little tabs, 3 of them, 1, 2, 3. We're going to bend those back and then gently remove the back casing off of the sender. Lift the back and then gently slide it down, and then the front should release. And I think I can already see what the issue is here. If you look very closely right in the middle of the wiper arm, you'll see there's a little mark. And if I lift this up, you can see there's actually a hole that's been worn right through the arm. So with that hole being there, we're not getting continuity between this coil and that arm. But we are still going to test the coil to make sure it's in good condition, because if the coil is broken, that can be a very difficult one to fix. So to test the coil, set your voltmeter to ohms. You can see where the coil connects to this plate up here. So place 1 lead on that plate, and with the second lead, very gently and carefully, touch it to the coil. As you move down the coil, your resistance value should change. As long as the value changes from top to bottom and you don't have open circuit, you know the coil is good. So our issue is definitely going to be this damage on the wiper, so we need to find a way to fix it. Well, we'll have to resolder that. That does make access a little bit easier though. I'd love to be able to get the arm off to work on it separately, but it's really fighting and I don't want to try and force it. This is a pretty fragile little piece, and if you break it, it's not replaceable. So I've turned it around and got access to the hole, and what we're going to try and do now is just fill it with solder and then reshape it with a file. Solder probably isn't the ideal material to use here. It's fairly soft, but it's the best that we've got. Trying to weld it isn't going to work just because of the size of that piece. The part will just burn away. And honestly, the weld material would probably be too hard and actually end up wearing through the wire wrap. I'm just waiting for my soldering iron to heat up here, and then we're going to give this a go. Retest it. Let's see if we've got continuity now. For some reason we're still open. Okay, so our sweep is working. Now let's test it at the terminals. Okay, so we're still open at the terminals. So that means that we have a problem between these pins and the sender itself. So we're going to switch back to our continuity check. So one of these pins will ground to the casing and one to this coil here. Okay, so our lower pin is grounding to the case, which means this pin here should have continuity to the coil, which it does not. So we have a break between here and the coil. And I think I see it right here. Don't know if you'll see that in the camera, but there's a solder joint here which is broken, and I can lift this tab right off. So we're going to resolder this joint and then try again. Okay, so it looks like that's taken care of our sweep gauge issue. Now all that's left is to resolder on the low fuel light switch, which I've knocked off, and reassemble the box. Then we can put it back in the truck and retest. We've got everything back in place and everything points to this should work, but there's only one way to know for sure. Sorry. Nothing. Alright, so it looks like we've got the fuel gauge completely sorted out now. Between the bad connector, the broken connection inside, and the damaged sweep, there are a lot of reasons for this unit to not work. Now the reason that we were able to fix this one is because older vehicles do have very mechanical gauges with all the wires and everything in them. Newer vehicles, unfortunately, it's not quite as easy to fix them. Quite often they use a carbon trace or another method of pickup, which once it wears through, that's the end of it, it's done. But if you do have an older vehicle, whether it's a Delica, a Datsun, a Toyota, whatever, quite often they use this style sender, and if it does stop working, quite often you can fix them. The fuel sender unit out of Susan's Datsun was so rusted up that it didn't even move. But a little bit of time and effort cleaning it up, it functions just fine now. So if you are having problems with your vehicle sender unit, take it apart, have a look. Chances are there's a good possibility that you can fix it. But that's it for today. If you enjoyed today's episode, please hit the like and subscribe. Otherwise, get out in the shop and do something. We'll see you next time. Have a good one.